570 Chuck Norris jokes. There is in fact an I in Norris, but there is no team, not even close. Chuck Norris could shoot someone and still have time to roundhouse kick him in the face before the bullet hit. The active ingredient in Red Bull is Chuck Norris's sweat. Chuck Norris doesn't go hunting, Chuck Norris goes killing. Chuck Norris is currently suing NBC, claiming Law & Order are trademarked names for his left and right legs. Police label anyone attacking Chuck Norris as a code 45-11, a suicide. Do you know why Baskin-Robbins only has 31 flavors? Because Chuck Norris doesn't like fudge ripple. When Chuck Norris found this website while surfing the internet, he roundhouse kicked his computer. 10 new facts were added instantly, including this one. When Chuck Norris goes to donate blood, he declines the syringe, and instead requests a handgun and a bucket. Before each filming of Walker, Texas Ranger, Chuck Norris is injected with 14 times the lethal dose of elephant tranquilizer. This is, of course, to limit his strength and mobility, in an attempt to lower the fatality rate of the actors he fights. Chuck Norris qualified with a top speed of 324 miles per hour at the Daytona 500. Without a car, Chuck Norris don't open no can of or pass. He makes his own. The Bermuda Triangle used to be the Bermuda Square, until Chuck Norris roundhouse kicked one of the corners off. Chuck Norris once ate an entire bottle of sleeping pills. They made him blink. Chuck Norris is not hung like a horse. Horses are hung like Chuck Norris. Chuck Norris can drink an entire gallon of milk in 37 seconds. When Chuck Norris calls 1 to 900 numbers, he doesn't get charged. He holds up the phone and money falls out. Chuck Norris is currently suing MySpace for taking the name of what he calls everything around you. Those aren't credits that roll after Walker Texas Ranger. It is actually a list of fatalities that occurred during the making of the episode. MacGyver can build an airplane out of gum and paper clips, but Chuck Norris can roundhouse kick his head through a wall and take it. A study showed the leading causes of death in the United States are 1. Heart disease, 2. Chuck Norris, 3. Cancer. Chuck Norris testicles do not produce sperm. They produce tiny white ninjas that recognize only one mission: seek and destroy. Archaeologists unearthed an Old English dictionary dating back to the year 1236. It defined victim as one who has encountered Chuck Norris. Chuck Norris can eat just one Lay's potato chip. Chuck Norris kills anyone that asks, "You want fries with that?" Because by now everyone should know that Chuck doesn't ever want fries with anything. Ever. Chuck Norris visits an active volcano every morning to get some of the best damn espresso on earth. Chuck Norris' roundhouse kick is so powerful, that on the set of Sidekicks he single-footedly destroyed Jonathan Brandis' career. The opening scene of the movie Saving Private Ryan is loosely based on games of dodgeball Chuck Norris played in 2nd grade. Contrary to popular belief, Chuck Norris, not the box jellyfish of northern Australia, is the most venomous creature on Earth. Within 3 minutes of being bitten, a human being experiences the following symptoms: fever, blurred vision, beard rash, tightness of the jeans, and the feeling of being repeatedly kicked through a car windshield. Chuck Norris does not own a house. He walks into random houses and people move. When Chuck Norris talks, everybody listens and dies. Chuck Norris has 2 speeds, walk and kill. Chuck Norris once played rugby by himself. He went undefeated. Chuck Norris once played rugby by himself. He went undefeated. Only Chuck Norris can prevent forest fires. Chuck Norris doesn't read books. He stares them down until he gets the information he wants. When Chuck Norris was born, the only person who cried was the doctor. Never slapped Chuck Norris. Chuck Norris once participated in the running of the bulls. He walked. Chuck Norris is widely predicted to be first black president. If you're thinking to yourself, but Chuck Norris isn't black, then you are dead wrong. And stop being a racist. Life is not, in fact, like a box of chocolates. It is more like a box of Chuck Norris, roundhouse kicking you in the face. And if you receive a box of Chuck Norris, you always know what you are going to get. A picture is worth 1,000 words. A Chuck Norris is worth 1 billion words. The best laid plans of mice and men often go awry. Even the worst laid plans of Chuck Norris come off without a hitch. Chuck Norris grinds his coffee with his teeth and boils the water with his own rage. Chuck Norris once sued Burger King after they refused to put razor wire in his Whopper Jr., insisting that that actually is his way. Thousands of years ago Chuck Norris came across a bear. It was so terrified that it fled north into the Arctic. It was also so terrified that all of its descendants now have white hair. When Arnold says the line "I'll be back" in the first Terminator movie, it is implied that is he going to ask Chuck Norris for help. Chuck Norris once roundhouse kicked a $10 bill into 200 nickels. Chuck Norris once rode a 9-foot grizzly bear through an automatic car wash. Instead of taking a shower, "Let the Bodies Hit the Floor" was originally written as Chuck Norris' theme song. Chuck Norris is the reason why Waldo is hiding. Chuck Norris's sweat is burned holes in concrete. There are only 2 things that can cut diamonds, other diamonds, and Chuck Norris. Chuck Norris has held the world championship in every weight class at the same time. Lightning never strikes twice in one place because Chuck Norris is looking for it. Chuck Norris does, in fact, live in a roundhouse. As President Roosevelt said, "We have nothing to fear but fear itself." And Chuck Norris Chuck Norris eats a bowl of diamonds every morning. When Chuck Norris goes out to eat, he orders a whole chicken, but he only eats its soul. Chuck Norris began selling the Total Gym as an ill-fated attempt to make his day-to-day opponents less laughably pathetic. It is scientifically impossible for Chuck Norris to have had a mortal father. The most popular theory is that he went back in time and fathered himself. Chuck Norris has never been accused of murder for the simple fact that his roundhouse kicks are recognized worldwide as acts of God. Chuck Norris can jump-start a car using jumper cables attached to his nipples. Human cloning is outlawed because if Chuck Norris were cloned, then it would be possible for a Chuck Norris roundhouse kick to meet another Chuck Norris roundhouse kick. Physicists theorize that this contact would end the universe. Chuck Norris puts the laughter in manslaughter. A movie scene depicting Chuck Norris losing a fight with Bruce Lee was the product of history's most expensive visual effect. When adjusted for inflation, the effect cost more than the gross national product of Paraguay. People have often asked the United States, "What is your secret weapon against terrorists?" We simply reply, Chuck Norris. James Cameron wanted Chuck Norris to play the Terminator. However, upon reflection, he realized that would have turned his movie into a documentary, so he went with Arnold Schwarzenegger. Using his trademark roundhouse kick, Chuck Norris once made a field goal in RJ Stadium in Tampa Bay from the 50-yard line of Qualcomm Stadium in San Diego. You know how they say if you die in your dream then you will die in real life? In actuality, if you dream of death then Chuck Norris will find you and kill you. The Bible was originally titled Chuck Norris and Friends. The square root of Chuck Norris is pain. Do not try to square Chuck Norris, the result is death. Chuck Norris does not get frostbite. Chuck Norris bites frost. A handicapped parking sign does not signify that this spot is for handicapped people. It is actually in fact a warning, that the spot belongs to Chuck Norris and that you will be handicapped if you park there. Everything King Midas touches turns to gold. Everything Chuck Norris touches turns up dead. Some people say that Chuck Norris is a myth. Those some people are now dead. Contrary to popular belief, America is not a democracy. It is a Chuck-tatorship. Chuck Norris had to stop washing his clothes in the ocean. The tsunamis were killing people. Chuck Norris eats 8 meals a day. 7 are steak, and the last is the rest of the cow. During the Vietnam War, Chuck Norris allowed himself to be captured. For torture, they made him eat his own entrails. He asked for seconds. Chuck Norris has 2 speeds: walk and kill. Chuck Norris doesn't chew gum. Chuck Norris chews tin foil. Chuck Norris doesn't wear a watch. He decides what time it is. Chuck Norris can taste lies. Chuck Norris is the best a man can get. Chuck Norris stared evil in the face, and it backed down. Chuck Norris sleeps with a pillow under his gun. Chuck Norris has 3 knees on each leg. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is based on a true story. Chuck Norris once swallowed a turtle whole, and when he crapped it out, the turtle was 6 feet tall and had learned karate. Chuck Norris can sneeze with his eyes open. Chuck Norris smells what The Rock is cooking. Because The Rock is Chuck Norris' personal chef, Chuck Norris can lead a horse to water and make it drink. Chuck Norris was once a knight in King Arthur's court. He was known as Sir Bearddown. Chuck Norris is the reason why Waldo is hiding. The United States could save billions in defense funding if they trade the military for Chuck Norris. The easiest way to determine Chuck Norris' age is to cut him in half and count the rings. A man once claimed Chuck Norris kicked his ass twice, but it was promptly dismissed as false. No one could survive it the first time. Chuck Norris' roundhouse kick is so powerful, it can be seen from outer space by the naked eye. On the set of Walker, Texas Ranger, Chuck Norris brought a dying lamb back to life by nuzzling it with his beard. As the onlookers gathered, the lamb sprang to life. Chuck Norris then roundhouse kicked it, killing it instantly. This was just to prove that the good Chuck giveth, and the good Chuck, he taketh away. Chuck Norris is responsible for China's overpopulation. He hosted a karate tournament in Beijing and all women within 1,000 miles became pregnant instantly. In a fight between Batman and Darth Vader, the winner would be Chuck Norris. Chuck Norris was the original sculptor of Mount Rushmore. He completed the entire project using only a bottle opener and a drywall trowel. Chuck Norris is the only man to ever defeat a brick wall in a game of tennis. When you say no one's perfect, Chuck Norris takes this as a personal insult. If Chuck Norris wants your opinion, he'll beat it into you. When Chuck Norris is in a crowded area, he doesn't walk around people. He walks through them. Chuck Norris's version of a chocolate milkshake is a raw porterhouse wrapped around 10 Hershey bars, and doused in diesel fuel. Chuck Norris drives an ice cream truck covered in human skulls. The air around Chuck Norris is always a balmy 78 degrees. Chuck Norris knows the last digit of pi. Chuck Norris brushes his teeth with barbed wire. Chuck Norris roundhouse kicks people in the face first and asks questions later. Chuck Norris does not style his hair. It lays perfectly in place out of sheer terror. Chuck Norris once went skydiving, but promised never to do it again. 1 Grand Canyon is enough. Chuck Norris sheds his skin twice a year. Coroners refer to dead people as ABCs. already been chucked. Chuck Norris built a better mousetrap, but the world was too frightened to beat a path to his door. In an average living room there are 1,242 objects Chuck Norris could use to kill you, including the room itself. In Desert Storm, the reason why the Iraqi army surrendered so quickly because they knew Chuck Norris was coming. Chuck Norris' pulse is measured on the Richter scale. Occam's razor says that the simplest answer tends to be the correct one. Norris' razor involves a flick of the wrist and a Colombian necktie. Most people have 23 pairs of chromosomes. Chuck Norris has 72. And they're all poisonous. Chuck Norris has never been in a fight, ever. Do you call one roundhouse kick to the face a fight? Newton's third law is wrong. Although it states that for each action, there is an equal and opposite reaction, there is no force equal in reaction to a Chuck Norris roundhouse kick. Chuck Norris doesn't see dead people. He makes people dead. Chuck Norris once kicked a horse in the chin. Its descendants are known today as giraffes. In the X-Men movies, none of the X-Men's superpowers are done with special effects. Chuck Norris is the stuntman for every character. You can lead a horse to water but cannot make him drink, unless you're Chuck Norris. Some kids play kick the can. Chuck Norris played kick the keg. In the medical community, death is referred to as Chuck Norris disease. How many roundhouse kicks does it take to get to the center of a Tootsie Pop? Just one. From Chuck Norris credit cards have no limit. Last weekend, he maxed them out. Chuck Norris built a time machine and went back in time to stop the JFK assassination. As Oswald shot, Chuck met all 3 bullets with his beard, deflecting them. JFK's head exploded out of sheer amazement. The 11th commandment is thou shalt not piss off Chuck Norris. This commandment is rarely enforced, as it is impossible to accomplish. When Chuck Norris was denied an Egg McMuffin at McDonald's because it was $10.35, he roundhouse kicked the store so hard it became a Wendy's. Ozzy Osbourne bites the heads off of bats. Chuck Norris bites the heads off of Siberian tigers. Chuck Norris sold his soul to the devil for his rugged good looks and unparalleled martial arts ability. Shortly after the transaction was finalized, Chuck roundhouse kicked the devil in the face and took his soul back. The devil, who appreciates irony, couldn't stay mad and admitted he should have seen it coming. They now play poker every second Wednesday of the month. There is no chin behind Chuck Norris' beard. There is only another fist. Contrary to popular belief, America is not a democracy. It is a Chucktatorship. The grass is always greener on the other side, unless Chuck Norris has been there. In that case the grass is most likely soaked in blood and tears. Chuck Norris doesn't shave. He kicks himself in the face. The only thing that can cut Chuck Norris is Chuck Norris. Rules of fighting: 1. Don't bring a knife to a gunfight. 2. Don't bring a gun to a Chuck Norris fight. Chuck Norris has the greatest poker face of all time. He won the 1983 World Series of Poker, despite holding only a joker, a get-out-of-jail-free Monopoly card, a 2 of clubs, 7 of spades and a green number 4 card from the game you know. When Chuck Norris does a push-up, he isn't lifting himself up, he's pushing the earth down. Chuck Norris facts, for Big List. Superman once watched an episode of Walker, Texas Ranger. He then cried himself to sleep. Chuck Norris never goes to the dentist because his teeth are unbreakable. His enemies never go to the dentist because they have no teeth. Chuck Norris crossed the road. No one has ever dared question his motives. According to Einstein's theory of relativity, Chuck Norris can actually roundhouse kick you. Yesterday, Google won't search for Chuck Norris because it knows you don't find Chuck Norris, he finds you. Chuck Norris invented Kentucky Fried Chicken's famous secret recipe, with 11 herbs and spices. But nobody ever mentions the 12th ingredient, fear. Along with his black belt, Chuck Norris often chooses to wear brown shoes. No one has dared call him on it. Ever. Most people know that Descartes said, I think, therefore I am. What most people don't know is that that quote continues. Afraid of Chuck Norris. They once made a Chuck Norris toilet paper, but there was a problem: it wouldn't take shit from anybody. Chuck Norris does not own a stove, oven, or microwave. Because revenge is a dish best served cold, Chuck Norris destroyed the periodic table, because he only recognizes the element of surprise. Since 1940, the year Chuck Norris was born, roundhouse kick-related deaths have increased 13,000%. Before sliced bread, people used to say that's the greatest thing since Chuck Norris. But Chuck Norris was displeased by this. So he roundhouse kicked a loaf of bread into slices. Once you go Norris, you are physically unable to go back. Chuck Norris is my homeboy. Chuck Norris can watch an episode of 60 Minutes in 22 seconds. After taking a steroids test, doctors informed Chuck Norris that he had tested positive. He laughed upon receiving this information, and said, of course my urine tested positive. What do you think they make steroids from? Chuck Norris successfully separated twins conjoined at the head by round kicking them in the face. Chuck Norris can cook minute rice in 30 seconds. Chuck Norris has a deep and abiding respect for human life. Unless it gets in his way. After returning from World War II unscathed, Bob Dole was congratulated by Chuck Norris with a handshake. The rest is history. When J. Robert Oppenheimer said I am become death, the destroyer of worlds, he was not referring to the atomic bomb. He was referring to the Chuck Norris Halloween costume he was wearing. It takes Chuck Norris 20 minutes to watch 60 Minutes. When Chuck Norris sneezes, He don't say Atka, he says die everyone. That's what happens next. Chuck Norris originally wrote the first dictionary. The definition for each word is as follows: a swift roundhouse kick to the face. Chuck Norris can kick through all 6 degrees of separation, hitting anyone, anywhere, in the face, at any time. To be or not to be? That is the question. The answer? Chuck Norris neither melts in your mouth nor in your hand. He shreds your trachea before ravaging your soul with a combination of chocolate, whiskey, roundhouse kicks and death. Oh, and pain. Lots of pain. Chuck Norris is like a dog, not only because he can smell fear, but because he can piss on whatever he wants. Chuck Norris doesn't step on toes. Chuck Norris steps on necks. Chuck Norris got a perfect score on his SATs, simply by writing Chuck Norris for every answer. Chuck Norris invented the question mark. In the Bible, Jesus turned water into wine. But then Chuck Norris turned that wine into beer. Chuck Norris is not Irish. His hair is soaked in the blood of his victims. Chuck Norris describes human beings as a sociable holder for blood and guts. Chuck Norris does know what Willis is talking about. Icy hot is too weak for Chuck Norris. After a workout, Chuck Norris rubs his muscles down with liquid hot magma. Chuck Norris won Super Bowls 7 and 8 single-handedly before unexpectedly retiring to pursue a career in ass-kicking. The chief export of Chuck Norris is pain. Chuck Norris is the only human being to display the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. You can never know both exactly where and how quickly he will roundhouse kick you in the face. Chuck Norris and Mr. T walked into a bar. The bar was instantly destroyed, as that level of awesome cannot be contained in one building. The pen is mightier than the sword, but only if the pen is held by Chuck Norris. Count from 1 to 10. That's how long it would take Chuck Norris to kill you. 47 times. If, by some incredible space-time paradox, Chuck Norris would ever fight himself, he'd win. Period. When Chuck Norris spits out watermelon seeds, he puts a machine gun to shame. Chuck Norris roundhouse kicks don't really kill people. They wipe out their entire existence from the space-time continuum. Everybody loves Raymond. Except Chuck Norris. Chuck Norris once ate 3 72-ounces steaks in 1 hour. He spent the first 45 minutes having sex with his waitress. There is no theory of evolution, just a list of creatures Chuck Norris allows to live. When an episode of Walker Texas Ranger was aired in France, the French surrendered to Chuck Norris just to be on the safe side. Chuck Norris wipes his ass with chainmail and sandpaper. There is no theory of evolution. Just a list of animals Chuck Norris allows to live. Chuck Norris once rode a bull, and 9 months later it had a calf. Chuck Norris can't finish a color by numbers, because his markers are filled with the blood of his victims. Unfortunately, all blood is dark red. Chuck Norris can believe it's not butter. It takes 14 puppeteers to make Chuck Norris smile, but only 2 to make him destroy an orphanage. When Chuck Norris falls in water, Chuck Norris doesn't get wet. Water gets Chuck Norris. Chuck Norris uses pepper spray to spice up his steaks. New. There are no steroids in baseball. Just players Chuck Norris has breathed on. Chuck Norris drinks napalm to quell his heartburn. Diamonds are not, despite popular belief, carbon. They are, in fact, Chuck Norris fecal matter. This was proven recently, when scientific analysis revealed what appeared to be Jean-Claude Van Damme bone fragments inside the Hope Diamond. The pie seen in American Pie is based on a dare Chuck Norris took when he was younger. However, in Chuck Norris' case, the pie was the molten crater of an active volcano. When the boogeyman goes to sleep every night, he checks his closet for Chuck Norris. Chuck Norris doesn't read books. He stares them down until he gets the information he wants. Ninjas want to grow up to be just like Chuck Norris. But usually they grow up just to be killed by Chuck Norris. When Chuck Norris is ready to wake up, he tells the sun to get thee above the horizon. In ancient China there is a legend that one day a child will be born from a dragon, grow to be a man, and vanquish evil from the land. That man is not Chuck Norris, because Chuck Norris killed that man. Oh Hu Kang Long. The translation from Mandarin Chinese reads, Crouching Chuck, Hidden Norris, aliens do indeed exist. They just know better than to visit a planet that Chuck Norris is on. Chuck Norris does not eat food. Understands that the only safe haven from Chuck Norris' fists is inside his own body. Love does not hurt. Chuck Norris does. 4 out of 5 doctors fail to recommend Chuck Norris as a solution to most problems. Also, 80% of doctors die unexplained, needlessly brutal deaths. When you're Chuck Norris, anything plus anything is equal to 1. One roundhouse kick to the face. Chuck Norris can slam a revolving door. The best part of waking up is not Folgers in your cup, but knowing that Chuck Norris didn't kill you in your sleep. Chuck Norris actually built the stairway to heaven. Chuck Norris just says no to drugs. If he said yes, it would collapse Colombia's infrastructure. The wind of Chuck Norris's roundhouse kick can be felt from 1,600 million miles away. Chuck Norris once worked as a weatherman for the San Diego Evening News. Every night he would make the same forecast, partly cloudy with a 75% chance of rain. If you Google search Chuck Norris getting his ass kicked you will generate 0 results. It just doesn't happen. The phrase break a leg was originally coined by Chuck Norris's co-stars in Walker, Texas Ranger as a good luck charm, indicating that a broken leg might be the worst extent of their injuries. This never proved to be the case. Chuck Norris once got into a fight with a one-armed ninja. Seeing that he had an unfair advantage, Chuck Norris ripped both of his arms off and one of his legs. He then roundhouse kicked the ninja in the head, killing him instantly, and proceeded to sew his limbs back on using only a rusty tent spike and baling wire. Someone once tried to tell Chuck Norris that roundhouse kicks aren't the best way to kick someone. This has been recorded by historians as the worst mistake anyone has ever made. No matter what your mother always said, Chuck Norris can tuna fish. Most tough men eat nails for breakfast. Chuck Norris does all of his grocery shopping at Home Depot. Chuck Norris will attain statehood in 2009. His state flower will be the magnolia. In honor of Chuck Norris, all McDonald's in Texas have an even larger size than the super size. When ordering, just ask to be Chuck-sized. Chuck Norris sperm can be seen with the naked eye. Each one is the size of a quarter. A high tide means Chuck Norris is flying over your coast. The tide is caused by God pissing his pants. TNT was originally developed by Chuck Norris to cure indigestion. There are no races, only countries of people Chuck Norris has beaten to different shades of black and blue. If you're driving down the road and you think Chuck Norris just cut you off, you better thank your lucky stars it wasn't the other way around. President Roosevelt once rode his horse 100 miles. Chuck Norris carried his the same distance in half the time. People created the automobile to escape from Chuck Norris. Not to be outdone, Chuck Norris created the automobile accident. Chuck Norris invented the bolt-action rifle, liquor, sexual intercourse, and football, in that order. If you ask Chuck Norris what time it is, he always says, 2 seconds till. After you ask, 2 seconds till what? He roundhouse kicks you in the face. Kenny G is allowed to live because Chuck Norris doesn't kill women. July 4th is Independence Day. And the day Chuck Norris was born. Coincidence? I think not. Chuck Norris never has to wax his skis because they're always slick with blood. How much would a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could Chuck Norris? All of it. In an emergency, Chuck Norris can be used as a flotation device. Chuck Norris can judge a book by its cover. Chuck Norris plays racquetball with a waffle iron and a bowling ball. Chuck Norris trick or treated as himself as a child. One time, Chuck Norris accidentally stubbed his toe. It destroyed the entire state of Ohio. Chuck Norris can in fact raise the roof. And he can do it with one hand. Outer space exists because it's afraid to be on the same planet with Chuck Norris. The only sure things are death and taxes, and when Chuck Norris goes to work for the IRS, they'll be the same thing. Chuck Norris has volunteered to remain on Earth after the rapture. He will spend his time fighting the Antichrist. Dinosaurs went extinct because of the Chuck Norrisaurus. Chuck Norris uses Tabasco sauce instead of Vicine. Chuck Norris starts every day with a protein shake made from Carnation instant breakfast, 1 dozen eggs, pure Colombian cocaine, and rattlesnake venom. He injects it directly into his neck with a syringe. Chuck Norris does not follow fashion trends, they follow him. But then he turns around and kicks their ass. Nobody follows Chuck Norris. A man once asked Chuck Norris if his real name is Charles. Chuck Norris did not respond. He simply stared at him until he exploded. 70% of a human's weight is water. 70% of Chuck Norris' weight is his dick. Chuck Norris's show is called Walker, Texas Ranger, because Chuck Norris doesn't run. The leading causes of death in the United States are 1. Heart disease. 2. Chuck Norris. 3. Cancer. A Chuck Norris-delivered roundhouse kick is the preferred method of execution in 16 states. The Manhattan Project was not intended to create nuclear weapons, it was meant to recreate the destructive power in a Chuck Norris roundhouse kick. They didn't even come close. Chuck Norris doesn't shower, he only takes blood baths. Chuck Norris played Russian roulette with a fully loaded gun and won. Sticks and stones may break your bones, but a Chuck Norris glare will liquefy your kidneys. Chuck Norris once sued the Houghton Mifflin textbook company when it became apparent that their account of the War of 1812 was plagiarized from his autobiography. It is said that looking into Chuck Norris' eyes will reveal your future. Unfortunately, everybody's future is always the same, death by a roundhouse kick to the face. The movie Delta Force was extremely hard to make because Chuck had to downplay his abilities. The first few cuts were completely unbelievable. Movie trivia: the movie Invasion USA is, in fact, a documentary. When taking the SAT, write Chuck Norris for every answer. You will score over 8,000. Chuck Norris likes long walks on the beach, Barry White music, Harlequin romance novels, songbirds, rainbows, and quiet time with his lady just before he roundhouse kicks her in the face. Chuck Norris doesn't go on the internet, he has every internet site stored in his memory. He refreshes web pages by blinking. Guns don't kill people. Chuck Norris kills people. Some people ask for a Kleenex when they sneeze. Chuck Norris asks for a body bag. Chuck Norris can win a game of Trivial Pursuit with one roll of the dice, and without answering a single question. Just a nod of the head, and a stroke of the beard. The helicopter was invented after Chuck Norris was observed doing 8 roundhouse kicks a second. Chuck Norris doesn't believe in ravioli. He stuffs a live turtle with beef and smothers it in pig's blood. Pluto is actually an orbiting group of British soldiers from the American Revolution who entered space after the Chuck gave them a roundhouse kick to the face. Chuck Norris has 12 moons. One of those moons is the Earth. Chuck Norris actually owns IBM. It was an extremely hostile takeover. Chuck Norris once bet NASA he could survive re-entry without a spacesuit. On July 19, 1999, a naked Chuck Norris re-entered the Earth's atmosphere, streaking over 14 states and reaching a temperature of 3,000 degrees. An embarrassed NASA publicly claimed it was a meteor, and still owes him a beer. Simply by pulling on both ends, Chuck Norris can stretch diamonds back into coal. The quickest way to a man's heart is with Chuck Norris' fist. Never look a gift Chuck Norris in the mouth, because he will bite your damn eyes off. When Chuck Norris does division, there are no remainders. Chuck Norris can skeletize a cow in 2 minutes. The original title for Star Wars was Skywalker, Texas Ranger. Starring Chuck Norris, for most people, home is where the heart is. For Chuck Norris, home is where he stores his collection of human skulls. Chuck Norris is not politically correct. He is just correct. Always. Chuck Norris once bench pressed the entire state of Ohio, and all of its residents. Chuck Norris brushes his teeth with a mixture of iron shavings, industrial paint remover, and wood grain alcohol. There are two types of people in the world. People that suck, and Chuck Norris. If you were somehow able to land a punch on Chuck Norris, your entire arm would shatter upon impact. This is only in theory, since, come on, who in their right mind would try this? While urinating, Chuck Norris is easily capable of welding titanium. Chuck Norris shot the sheriff, but he roundhouse-kicked the deputy. The Sherman tank was originally called the Norris tank until Chuck Norris decided it wasn't tough enough to be associated with him. The Army, for fear of Chuck Norris, renamed the tank and promised to develop a weapon more fitting of his name. To date, no weapon created has been barbarous enough to be named after Chuck Norris. There is no such thing as global warming. Chuck Norris was cold, so he turned the sun up. Chuck Norris can win at solitaire with only 18 cards. What was going through the minds of all of Chuck Norris' victims before they died? His shoe. They had to edit the first ending of Lone Wolf McQuad after Chuck Norris kicked David Carradine's ass, then proceeded to barbecue and eat him, faster than a speeding bullet. More powerful than a locomotive. Able to leap tall buildings in a single bound. Yes, these are some of Chuck Norris's warm-up exercises. In the first Jurassic Park movie, the Tyrannosaurus Rex wasn't chasing the Jeep. Chuck Norris was chasing the Tyrannosaurus and the Jeep. There is endless debate about the existence of the human soul. Well, it does exist, and Chuck Norris finds it delicious. Chuck Norris is the only person who can simultaneously hold and fire 5 Uzis, 1 in each hand, 1 in each foot, and the 5th one he roundhouse kicks into the air, so that it sprays bullets. In the movie The Matrix, Chuck Norris is the Matrix. If you pay close attention in the green falling code scenes, you can make out the faint texture of his beard. Time waits for no man. Unless that man is Chuck Norris. MacGyver immediately tried to make a bomb out of some Q-tips and Gatorade, but Chuck Norris roundhouse kicked him in the solar plexus. MacGyver promptly threw up his own heart. Q. How many Chuck Norris does it take to change a light bulb? A. None. Chuck Norris prefers to kill in the dark. The Chuck Norris military unit was not used in the game Civilization 4, because a single Chuck Norris could defeat the entire combined nations of the world in one turn. Chuck Norris can touch MC Hammer. Chuck Norris counted to infinity, twice. Tom Clancy has to pay royalties to Chuck Norris because The Sum of All Fears is the name of Chuck Norris' autobiography. Jack Bauer tried to use his detailed knowledge of torture techniques, but to no avail. Chuck Norris thrives on pain. Chuck Norris then ripped off Jack Bauer's arm and beat him to death with it. Game, set, match. Chuck Norris enjoys a good practical joke. His favorite is where he removes your lower intestine and pretends to make a balloon animal out of it. Then he cracks your skull open with a Volvo for not complimenting him on his balloon animal. Chuck Norris doesn't look both ways before he crosses the street. He just roundhouses any cars that get too close. It's widely believed that Jesus was Chuck Norris' stunt double for crucifixion due to the fact that it is impossible for nails to pierce Chuck Norris' skin. The phrase balls to the wall was originally conceived to describe Chuck Norris entering any building smaller than an aircraft hangar. It is believed dinosaurs are extinct due to a giant meteor. That's true if you want to call Chuck Norris a giant meteor. Chuck Norris can get blackjack with just one card. The world's fastest car has 7 gears. 5, 6, and Chuck Norris, what's known as the UFC, or Ultimate Fighting Championship, doesn't use its full name, which happens to be Ultimate Fighting Championship, non-Chuck Norris division. One time I was with Norris in the back of a pickup truck, along with a live deer. Norris goes up to the deer and says, "I'm Chuck Norris. Say it." Then he manipulates the deer's lips in such a way as to make it say, "Chuck Norris." It wasn't exactly like it, but it was pretty good for a deer. Remember the Ultimate Warrior? He quit wrestling because Chuck Norris wanted his nickname back. The US did not boycott the 1980 Summer Olympics in Moscow due to political reasons. Chuck Norris killed the entire US team with a single roundhouse kick during Taekwondo practice. Chuck Norris uses a night light. Not because Chuck Norris is afraid of the dark, but the dark is afraid of Chuck Norris. There is no theory of evolution. Just a list of creatures Chuck Norris has allowed to live. The truth will set you free. Unless Chuck Norris has you, in which case, forget it buddy. Chuck Norris' first job was as a paperboy. There were no survivors. The phrase dead ringer refers to someone who sits behind Chuck Norris in a movie theater and forgets to turn their cell phone off. There is no control button on Chuck Norris' computer. Chuck Norris is always in control. For Spring Break '05, Chuck Norris drove to Madagascar, riding a chariot pulled by 2 electric eels. Chuck Norris can do a roundhouse kick faster than the speed of light. This means that if you turn on a light switch, you will be dead before the light bulb turns on. The speed of light was instituted because Chuck Norris didn't want to get winded outrunning it. Chuck Norris hates to sweat. There is no chin under Chuck Norris' beard. There is only another fist. In a tag team match, Chuck Norris was teamed with Hulk Hogan against King Kong Bundy and Andre the Giant. He pinned all 3 at the same time. When Bruce Banner gets mad, he turns into the Hulk. When the Hulk gets mad, he turns into Chuck Norris. Chuck Norris doesn't go at the speed of light, he goes at the speed of Norris. Chuck Norris doesn't use aftershave, he uses liquid hot magma. Chuck Norris doesn't play God. Playing is for children. Chuck Norris once skewered a man with the Eiffel Tower. Chuck Norris doesn't bowl strikes, he just knocks down 1 pin and the other 9 faint. Staring at Chuck Norris for extended periods of time without proper eye protection will cause blindness, and possibly foot-sized bruises on the face. Little known medical fact. Chuck Norris invented the cesarean section when he roundhouse kicked his way out of his mother's womb. The last thing you hear before Chuck Norris gives you a roundhouse kick? No one knows because dead men tell no tales. Nagasaki never had a bomb dropped on it. Chuck Norris jumped out of a plane and punched the ground. Chuck Norris never wet his bed as a child. The bed wet itself out of fear. Chuck Norris doesn't have blood. He is filled with magma. When Chuck Norris plays Oregon Trail, his family does not die from cholera or dysentery, but rather, roundhouse kicks to the face. He also requires no wagon, since he carries the oxen, axles, and buffalo meat on his back. He always makes it to Oregon before you. With the rising cost of gasoline, Chuck Norris is beginning to worry about his drinking habit. 182,000 Americans die from Chuck Norris-related accidents every year. Chuck Norris invented black. In fact, he invented the entire spectrum of visible light. Except pink. Tom Cruise invented pink. One time, at band camp, Chuck Norris ate a percussionist. Mr. T pities the fool. Chuck Norris rips the fool's head off. For every movie about Vietnam starring Chuck Norris, the historical duration of the war decreases. Just 3 more missing in action sequels, and that war will have never actually existed. Chuck Norris is the only man who has, literally, beaten the odds. With his fists, nothing can escape the gravity of a black hole, except for Chuck Norris. Chuck Norris eats black holes. They taste like chicken. Some people like to eat frogs' legs. Chuck Norris likes to eat lizard legs. Hence, snakes. If at first you don't succeed, you're not Chuck Norris. Chuck Norris once ordered a steak in a restaurant. The steak did what it was told. Chuck Norris once pulled out a single hair from his beard and skewered 3 men through the heart with it. For undercover police work, Chuck Norris pins his badge underneath his shirt, directly into his chest. Chuck Norris was the 4th wise man, who gave baby Jesus the gift of beard, which he carried with him until he died. The other 3 wise men were enraged by the preference that Jesus showed to Chuck's gift, and arranged to have him written out of the Bible. All 3 died soon after of mysterious roundhouse kick-related injuries. Chuck Norris doesn't throw up if he drinks too much. Chuck Norris throws down. Chuck Norris proved that we are alone in the universe. We went before his first space expedition. On his birthday, Chuck Norris randomly selects one lucky child to be thrown into the sundae. Instead of having a cigarette after sex, Chuck Norris heads outside and grounds his cattle. Remember the Soviet Union? They decided to quit after watching a Delta Force marathon on satellite TV. Chuck Norris once roundhouse kicked someone so hard that his foot broke the speed of light, went back in time, and killed Amelia Earhart while she was flying over the Pacific Ocean. CNN was originally created as the Chuck Norris Network to update Americans with on-the-spot ass-kicking in real time. Chuck Norris knows everything there is to know, except for the definition of mercy. In the words of Julius Caesar, Veni, Vidi, Vici, Chuck Norris. Translation: I came, I saw, and I was roundhouse kicked in the face by Chuck Norris. Chuck Norris doesn't churn butter. He roundhouse kicks the cows and the butter comes straight out. Chuck Norris doesn't wash his clothes, he disembowels them. Crime does not pay, unless you are an undertaker following Walker, Texas Ranger, on a routine patrol. Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, is the military code word for Chuck Norris basement. There are 4 legal methods of execution in the United States: lethal injection, gas chamber, electric chair and Chuck Norris. Chuck Norris ordered a Big Mac at Burger King, and got one. Chuck Norris keeps his friends close and his enemies closer. Close enough to drop them with one roundhouse kick to the face. Chuck Norris invented all 32 letters of the alphabet. Chuck Norris once roundhouse kicked a salesman. Over the phone, Chuck Norris does not kick ass and take names. In fact, Chuck Norris kicks ass and assigns the corpse a number. It is currently recorded to be in the billions. The term Cleveland steamer got its name from Chuck Norris, when he took a dump while visiting the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in buried northern Ohio under a glacier of fecal matter. There is no such thing as a lesbian, just a woman who has never met Chuck Norris. He who lives by the sword, dies by the sword. He who lives by Chuck Norris, dies by the roundhouse kick. Anytime someone is elected president in the United States, they must ask permission from Chuck Norris to live in the White House. The reason for this is because Chuck Norris had won every federal, state, and local election since 1777. He just allows others to run the country in his place. Chuck Norris is so fast, he can run around the world and punch himself in the back of the head. The phrase break a leg was originally coined by Chuck Norris's co-stars in Walker, Texas Ranger as a good luck charm, indicating that a broken leg might be the worst extent of their injuries. This never proved to be the case. Brokeback Mountain is not just a movie. It's also what Chuck Norris calls the pile of dead ninjas in his front yard. As an infant, Chuck Norris' parents gave him a toy hammer. He gave the world Stonehenge. Chuck Norris does not know about this website. If he did, he would have just deleted the internet. When Chuck Norris plays Monopoly, it affects the actual world economy. Chuck Norris's body temperature is 98.6 degrees Celsius. Chuck Norris is not capable of hitting a target on the broad side of a barn. Every time he tries, the whole damn barn falls down. When Chuck Norris makes a burrito, its main ingredient is real toes. Chuck Norris invented a language that incorporates karate and roundhouse kicks. So next time Chuck Norris is kicking your ass, don't be offended or hurt. He may be just trying to tell you he likes your hat. Contrary to popular belief, there is indeed enough Chuck Norris to go around. The chemical formula for the highly toxic cyanide ion is CN. These are also Chuck Norris initials. This is not a coincidence. Chuck Norris recently had the idea to sell his urine as a canned beverage. We know this beverage as Red Bull. Saddam Hussein was not found hiding in a hole. Saddam was roundhouse kicked in the head by Chuck Norris in Kansas, which sent him through the earth, stopping just short of the surface of Iraq. On Valentine's Day, Chuck Norris gives his wife the still beating heart of one of his enemies. Being very romantic, Chuck Norris believes every day should be Valentine's Day. Chuck Norris can hold his breath for 9 years. When in a bar, you can order a drink called a Chuck Norris. It is also known as a Bloody Mary. If your name happens to be Mary, Chuck Norris does not have to answer the phone. His beard picks up the incoming electrical impulses and translates them into audible sound. Chuck Norris does not sleep. He waits. If you work in an office with Chuck Norris, don't ask him for his 3-hole punch. When Chuck Norris does a push-up, he isn't lifting himself up, he's pushing the earth down. Chuck Norris let the dogs out. Kryptonite has been found to contain trace elements of Chuck Norris roundhouse kicks to the face. This is why it is so deadly to Superman, who let the dogs out. Chuck Norris let the dogs out and then roundhouse kicked them through an Oldsmobile. Whoever said only the good die young was probably in Chuck Norris's kindergarten class. Most people fear the Reaper. Chuck Norris considers him a promising rookie. Maslow's theory of higher needs does not apply to Chuck Norris. He only has 2 needs, killing people and finding people to kill. Contrary to popular belief, the Titanic didn't hit an iceberg. The ship was off course and accidentally ran into Chuck Norris while he was doing the backstroke across the Atlantic. There are no such things as tornadoes. Chuck Norris just hates trailer parks. For some, the left testicle is larger than the right one. For Chuck Norris, each testicle is larger than the other one. Nobody doesn't like Sarah Lee. Except Chuck Norris, it is better to give than to receive. This is especially true of a Chuck Norris roundhouse kick. Science fact, roundhouse kicks are comprised primarily of an element called chucktanium. Chuck Norris' house has no doors, only walls that he walks through. Scotty in Star Trek often says you cannot change the laws of physics. This is untrue. Chuck Norris can change the laws of physics with his fists. The first rule of Chuck Norris is, you do not talk about Chuck Norris. Chuck Norris always knows the exact location of Carmen Sandiego. Chuck Norris has to register every part of his body as a separate lethal weapon. His spleen is considered a concealed weapon in over 50 states. Helen Keller's favorite color is Chuck Norris. Chuck Norris likes his coffee half and half coffee grounds, half wood grain alcohol. Chuck Norris eats lightning and farts thunder. If Chuck Norris roundhouse kicks you, you will die. If Chuck Norris misses you with a roundhouse kick, the wind behind the kick will tear out your pancreas. Sweating bullets is literally what happens when Chuck Norris gets too hot. The show Survivor had the original premise of putting people on an island with Chuck Norris. There were no survivors, and nobody is brave enough to go to the island to retrieve the footage. Give a man a fish, and you will feed him for a day. Give a man anything that is better than a fish, and Chuck Norris will beat his ass and take it. On the SAT, if you put Chuck Norris for every answer, you will score over 8,000. When Chuck Norris says more cowbell, he means it. If you spell Chuck Norris in Scrabble, you win. Forever. Chuck Norris was once in a knife fight, and the knife lost. Chuck Norris will never have a heart attack. His heart isn't nearly foolish enough to attack him. Earth's emergency defense plan in case of alien invasion is Chuck Norris. Every time Chuck Norris smiles, someone dies. Unless he smiles while he's roundhouse kicking someone in the face. Then 2 people die. Chuck Norris' beard hair is believed to be an aphrodisiac in China. Not everyone that Chuck Norris is mad at gets killed. Some get away. They are called astronauts. Fear is not the only emotion Chuck Norris can smell. He can also detect hope, as in I hope I don't get a roundhouse kick from Chuck Norris. Chuck Norris once lost the remote, but maintained control of the TV by yelling at it in between bites of his filet-of-child sandwich. Archaeologists in India recently uncovered a new dinosaur. It's actually many dinosaurs, but one is in the middle of all the others. The one in the middle is believed to have killed the others with a single roundhouse kick to the face. The archaeologists wanted to call it Chuck Norrisaurus, but the Indian government changed the name to Hymotosaurus because it's simply not possible for Mr. Norris to be killed. Chuck Norris once shat blood, the blood of 11,940 natives he had killed and eaten. Chuck Norris eats steak for every single meal. Most times he forgets to kill the cow. Chuck Norris is the only person in the world that can actually email a roundhouse kick. Chuck Norris eats beef jerky and craps gunpowder. Then, he uses that gunpowder to make a bullet, which he uses to kill a cow and make more beef jerky. Some people refer to this as the circle of life. Chuck Norris needs a monkey wrench and a blowtorch to masturbate. They say curiosity killed the cat. This is false. Chuck Norris killed the cat. Every single one of them. We live in an expanding universe. All of it is trying to get away from Chuck Norris. Chuck Norris wears Orion's belt around his pinky toe and he eats with the Big Dipper. Chuck Norris can sneeze with his eyes open. Chuck Norris can slam a revolving door. Chuck Norris doesn't stub his toes. He accidentally destroys chairs, bed frames, and sidewalks. They were going to release a Chuck Norris edition of Clue, but the answer always turns out to be Chuck Norris. In the library. With a roundhouse kick. Chuck Norris once invited all of the other badasses from TV to duke it out in order to see who was the supreme badass. Only two showed up, Jack Bauer and MacGyver. If you have $5 and Chuck Norris has $5, Chuck Norris has more money than you. Chuck Norris is not only a noun, but a verb. Chuck Norris doesn't say, "Who's your daddy?" because he knows the answer. Chuck Norris once shot down a German fighter plane with his finger, by yelling, "Bang!" Chuck Norris puts his pants on one leg at a time, just like the rest of us. The only difference is, then he kills people. Chuck Norris does not play the lottery. It doesn't have nearly enough balls. Chuck Norris can divide by zero. That's not Chuck Norris doing push-ups, that's Chuck Norris moving the Earth away from the path of a deadly asteroid. Two wrongs don't make a right. Unless you're Chuck Norris. Then two wrongs make a roundhouse kick to the face. Chuck Norris' favorite cereal is Kellogg's Nails and Gravel. Chuck Norris can lead a horse to water and make it drink. Some people wear Superman pajamas. Superman wears Chuck Norris pajamas. Paper beats rock, rock beats scissors, and scissors beats paper, but Chuck Norris beats all three at the same time. When Chuck Norris was a baby, he didn't suck his mother's breast. His mother served him whiskey, straight out of the bottle. Chuck Norris is suing MySpace for taking the name of what he calls everything around you. The word kill was invented by Chuck Norris. Other words were die, beer, and what. Chuck Norris is his own line at the DMV. Chuck Norris is his own line at the DMV. If you rearrange the letters in Chuck Norris, they also spell crush rock in. The words with his fists are understood. Chuck Norris doesn't daydream. He's too busy giving other people nightmares. Chuck Norris has banned rainbows from the state of North Dakota. Cars were invented to have a faster way of fleeing from Chuck Norris. Not to be outdone, Chuck Norris invented the car accident. Chuck Norris was what Willis was talking about. The 7 wonders of the ancient world were, Chuck Norris' left and right hands, his left and right feet, his belly button, his liver, and his beard. Chuck Norris destroyed the periodic table, because Chuck Norris only recognizes the element of surprise. Chuck Norris likes his ice like he likes his skulls, crushed. According to the Encyclopedia Britannica, the Native American Trail of Tears has been redefined as anywhere that Chuck Norris walks. Noah was the only man notified before Chuck Norris relieved himself in the Atlantic Ocean. Chuck Norris runs on batteries. Specifically, diehards. Chuck Norris owns a chain of fast food restaurants throughout the Southwest. They serve nothing but barbecue-flavored ice cream and Hot Pockets. Brokeback Mountain is not just a movie. It's also what Chuck Norris calls the pile of dead ninjas in his front yard. Chuck Norris is a vegetarian. Meaning, he does not eat animals until first he puts them into vegetative state with his fists. Chuck Norris' favorite cut of meat is the roundhouse. If tapped, a Chuck Norris roundhouse kick could power the country of Australia for 44 minutes. All roads lead to Chuck Norris. And by the transitive property, a roundhouse kick to the face, Apple pays Chuck Norris 99 cents every time he listens to a song. Proponents of higher-order theories of consciousness argue that consciousness is explained by the relation between two levels of mental states in which a higher-order mental state takes another mental state. If you mention this to Chuck Norris, expect an explosive roundhouse kick to the face for spouting too much fancy talk. In the beginning there was nothing. Then Chuck Norris roundhouse kicked that nothing in the face and said get a job. That is the story of the universe. The Great Wall of China was originally created to keep Chuck Norris out. It failed miserably. There's an order to the universe. Space, time. Chuck Norris, just kidding. Chuck Norris is first. Chuck Norris was once on Jeopardy! This show is notable in that it was the first occasion in Jeopardy history that Alex Trebek had appeared without a mustache. and a head. Crop circles are Chuck Norris' way of telling the world that sometimes corn needs to lie down. Chuck Norris' hand is the only hand that can beat a royal flush. The crossing lights in Chuck Norris's hometown say die slowly, and die quickly. They each have a picture of Chuck Norris punching or kicking a pedestrian. Chuck Norris can blow bubbles with beef jerky. Chuck Norris once ate a whole cake before his friends could tell him there was a stripper in it. Behind every successful man, there is a woman. Behind every dead man, there is Chuck Norris. Chuck Norris originally appeared in the Street Fighter II video game, but was removed by beta testers because every button caused him to do a roundhouse kick. When asked about this glitch, Norris replied, "That's no glitch. He who laughs last, laughs best. He who laughs at Chuck Norris dies. Chuck Norris is so bad he makes viruses sick." As such, Chuck Norris is also responsible for the eradication of smallpox. Scientists have estimated that the energy given off during the Big Bang is roughly equal to 1 cnrhk. Chuck Norris roundhouse kick. The 1972 Miami Dolphins lost one game. It was an exhibition game versus Chuck Norris and 3 7-year-old girls. Chuck Norris won with a roundhouse kick to the face in overtime. Chuck Norris doesn't kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Chuck Norris kills all birds, with 2 stones. The ones in his pants. Chuck Norris once created a flamethrower by urinating into a lighter. The drummer for Def Leppard's only got 1 arm. Chuck Norris needed a back scratcher. Chuck Norris has never looked a baby in the eyes cause it might him cry, but if he does it also makes him want to punch a baby. The first law of thermodynamics states that energy can neither be created nor destroyed. Unless it meets Chuck Norris, Little Miss Muffet sat on her tuffet, until Chuck Norris roundhouse kicked her into a glacier. Chuck Norris can kill 2 stones with 1 bird. There are no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. Chuck Norris lives in Oklahoma. Chuck Norris is expected to win gold in every swimming competition at the 2008 Beijing Olympics, even though Chuck Norris does not swim. This is because when Chuck Norris enters the water gets out of his way and Chuck Norris simply walks across the pool floor. Someone once videotaped Chuck Norris getting pissed off. It was called Walker, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Chuck Norris once challenged Lance Armstrong in a "Who has more testicles?" contest. Chuck Norris won by 5. Scientifically speaking, it is impossible to charge Chuck Norris with obstruction of justice. This is because even Chuck Norris cannot be in 2 places at the same time. Chuck Norris has never won an Academy Award for acting. Because he's not acting, Chuck Norris does not sleep. He waits. Chuck Norris discovered a new theory of relativity involving multiple universes in which Chuck Norris is even more badass than in this one. When it was discovered by Albert Einstein and made public, Chuck Norris roundhouse kicked him in the face. We know Albert Einstein today as Stephen Hawking. Chuck Norris cannot love, he can only not kill. Chuck Norris got his driver's license at the age of 16. Seconds, the original title for Alien vs. Predator was Alien and Predator vs. Chuck Norris. The film was cancelled shortly after going into pre-production. No one would pay $9 to see a movie 14 seconds long. Chuck Norris can win a game of Connect 4 in only 3 moves. Chuck Norris make onions COI. A man once taunted Chuck Norris with a bag of Lay's potato chips, saying betcha can't eat just one. Chuck Norris proceeded to eat the chips, the bag, and the man in one deft move. When Chuck Norris wants an egg, he cracks open a chicken. Chuck Norris did in fact, build Rome in a day. If a tree falls in the forest, does anybody hear? Yes. Chuck Norris hears it. Chuck Norris can hear everything. Chuck Norris can hear the shrieking terror in your soul. Chuck Norris doesn't own a can opener, he just chews through the can. Godzilla is a Japanese rendition of Chuck Norris' first visit to Tokyo. Chuck Norris invented his own type of karate. It's called Chuck Will Kill. Chuck Norris doesn't believe in Germany. If you gave Chuck Norris a typewriter and 0.00000000000000000000000000001th of a second he can write the complete works of Shakespeare. Industrial logging isn't the cause of deforestation. Chuck Norris needs toothpicks. Chuck Norris can hit you so hard that he can actually alter your DNA. Decades from now your descendants will occasionally clutch their heads and yell, "What the hell was that?" When Steven Seagal kills a ninja, he only takes its hide. When Chuck Norris kills a ninja, he uses every part. Chuck Norris can set ants on fire with a magnifying glass. At night, when you play Monopoly with Chuck Norris, you do not pass go, and you do not collect $200. You will be lucky if you make it out alive. Chuck Norris is 10 feet tall, weighs 2 tons, breathes fire, and could eat a hammer and take a shotgun blast standing. Chuck Norris doesn't wear a watch, he decides what time it is. Chuck Norris is the only person to ever win a staring contest against Ray Charles and Stevie Wonder at the same time. In an act of great philanthropy, Chuck made a generous donation to the American Cancer Society. He donated 6,000 dead bodies for scientific research. Chuck Norris can split the atom with his bare hands. The original draft of The Lord of the Rings featured Chuck Norris instead of Frodo Baggins. It was only 5 pages long, as Chuck roundhouse kicked Sauron's ass halfway through the first chapter. If Chuck Norris were a calendar, every month would be named Chucktober, and every day he'd kick your ass. There is no CTRL button on Chuck Norris's computer. Chuck Norris is always in control. When somebody yells last one in is a rotten egg, Chuck Norris is never the rotten egg. Most boots are made for walk-in. Chuck Norris boots ain't that merciful. Chuck Norris roundhouse kick is so powerful, it can be seen from outer space by the naked eye. There are now 5 cup sizes at Starbucks: short, tall, grand, venti, and Chuck Norris. Divide Chuck Norris by 0 and you will in fact get one badass that is. Chuck Norris used to play baseball. When Babe Ruth was hailed as the better player, Chuck Norris killed him with a baseball bat to the throat. Lou Gehrig got off easy. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool Chuck Norris once and he will roundhouse you in the face. Chuck Norris has to use a stunt double when he does crying scenes. Scientists believe the world began with a Big Bang. Chuck Norris shrugs it off as a bad case of gas. Chuck Norris wears a live rattlesnake as a condom. In 1990, Chuck Norris founded the non-profit organization Kick Drugs Out of America. If the organization's name were Roundhouse Kick Drugs Out of America, there wouldn't be any drugs in the Western Hemisphere. Anywhere, when Chuck Norris goes to Vegas, he doesn't have to gamble. The casinos just give him stacks of money. For Chuck Norris, every street is one way. His way. Chuck Norris uses 8x10 sheets of plywood as toilet paper. Chuck Norris once ate full 30-pound bowling balls without chewing. Jean-Claude Van Damme once kicked Chuck Norris' ass. He was then awakened from his dream by a roundhouse kick to the face. Every time someone uses the word intense, Chuck Norris always replies, "You know what else is intense?" Followed by a roundhouse kick to the face. Chuck Norris did not lose his virginity, he stalked it and then destroyed it with extreme prejudice. Chuck Norris uses Tabasco sauce for eye drop.